Hello, everybody, or as they say here, God after midday. I hope I got that right. It would be a shame to get it wrong because our Swedish friends seem to have got namaste, right. So I work with McKinsey & Company. I'm a partner based in India. And in my current role, I lead the McKinsey Global Institute's work on a bunch of global themes, but also on everything to do with India. And I think it would be fair to say that from our standpoint, times have never been as exciting as they are right now. McKinsey came into India about 25 years ago in 1991, which was when the first wave of economic reforms and the opening up of the economy was happening. That was an exciting time as well. But we do see a lot of momentum now as we speak. And to Adam's point, I mean, how much of this is real? What are the hits and misses? We would be the first to acknowledge that there are many. But what's really interesting about India is I think it's a misnomer to think about India as one thing. At any point in time, depending on who you talk to, you find people are either, there is extreme exuberance or extreme despondency, and they both coexist in the same reality. So what really explains that? I think what explains part of it is the fact that India is actually so diverse, and there's so much going on, and there are so many layers that you really do need to scratch the surface a bit and talk about different parts of India differently, and that's a bit of the flavor that I'm going to give you today. Let's talk about consumers. We've all heard about the demographics and the consumer segments and so on, and we would think that as you think about consumers, you do have this polarization. Forbes magazine tells us that there are 84 billionaires in India, and it's actually the 4th largest home to billionaires of anywhere around the world. A lot of them inherited businesses which have been scaled up to global size, but increasingly a lot of first-generation businesses that have grown up in India. But you also have the largest number of quote-unquote poor. So this is not extreme poverty. I think India's done a reasonably good job now of bringing people out of extreme poverty. But even once you exit poverty, there is a big segment of what we call vulnerable people who aren't really comfortably middle class and who still could slip into poverty with shocks to their income. That's a very large segment, and they coexist. And then between them is the so-called sweet spot of a lot of consumer businesses and manufacturing businesses and financial businesses. We call that the consuming class. It's the middle class that has enough discretionary spending power. And we think by our somewhat moderate numbers, not exuberant numbers, that the size of the consuming class households is set to triple in India in the coming decade, to go from about 27 to 30 million households now to about almost 90 million households out in 2025. And after China, this will be the largest incremental number of consuming class households coming on stream anywhere. And you see that actually more than 100 consumer segments. That's because none of these is actually homogeneous. There is a lot of diversity within these, the things that they like to do, the things they like to eat, the TV channels that they watch, the newspapers that they read. There is so much variety that you have to really think about slivers of segments as you think about this huge market. So India is not a country, but more like a continent. We would say it's certainly not China. It's not a top-down story. There's a lot of bottom-up enterprise, but also bottom-up policy making and execution by state governments. It's a federal structure where the states are actually very powerful, and doing business in India means that you really have to understand stakeholders at different levels, quite often pick and choose the chief ministers who are champions of change and really work with them. To your point around the Nagpur experiment around green buses, that's an example of picking a change agent or a place that's actually a little more dynamic. Also the fact that parts of India are set to be as big as markets themselves. So if you just look at these 3 cities, we think they're projected to be the size of middle-income households by 2025 or 2030. And for multinational companies, if you think about a large multinational, you probably know who's heading your sales in Malaysia or Vietnam. You probably are not thinking about, who heads sales for me in the city of Delhi or the city of Mumbai. But that's what some of the companies in India are actually moving towards, to think very granularly. Now, these cities, which are the big growth engines, are not just benefiting residents of the city, but they are radiating economic momentum around them. What you see shaded on this map are actually the rural and semi-urban districts that surround the 69 largest cities. India will have 69 cities with a population of more than 1 million each, what we call the metro cities. And the shaded districts, which are a combination of rural and urban, are linked into those cities, and we think collectively will account for almost 80% of India's incremental GDP growth going forward. Why is this important? Because you don't have to think about India as a whole country or a whole market. Companies such as Unilever in the consumer space, or Mahindra's in the auto space, or Wholesome in the cement space, are increasingly designing their sales strategy or their organization structures, or indeed a lot of their sourcing and procurement strategies around clusters, maybe up to 50 to 100 clusters of small markets, and really organizing on that basis to go very deep into tapping that Indian consumer. The second big trend, I think Sushma has talked about it, so has Simon, is really the fact that as we look forward from where we are today, India is projected to have about 460 million internet subscribers by July of this year. That makes it the second largest internet user market in the world, second only to China. And we think that even if you strip out some of the extra efforts that the government is making through Digital India, even the underlying momentum of disruptions in technology themselves will make this a 700 to 900 million internet subscriber market 10 years out. And that's disrupting virtually every business segment or every industry as we speak. The top things, what do Indians like to do with the mobile internet that they now have on their smartphones? Surprisingly, the top 4 drivers of content, we call it the ABCD of mobile content. It's astrology, Bollywood, cricket, and devotion. And what can I say? We like doing that, so that's what we do. But the categories of the future, we think financial services is going to be very big because of the disruptions around digital payments and digital identity. We think healthcare is going to be very big simply because of a large unmet need and new ways of tapping that market. And of course, e-commerce, not just in goods, but also in services, in jobs, so all kinds of marketplaces which give providers of services new access to opportunities. I'm not going to talk about the test bed for global innovation. I think Simon has spoken most eloquently about this. It's certainly true that what we learn in India is replicable or has very potent application opportunities elsewhere in the world, and you should really think about this in terms of how it actually helps learn new ways of doing things and new markets to tap. And then finally, this one point around saying that all of this notwithstanding, whichever government is in power, whether at the center, the state, or local levels, in whatever shape or form, whatever degree of progressiveness, if you will, the point is that the unmet need of a lot of the population for basic services is going to dominate the agenda of every government. And the relevance of businesses is always viewed in the light of what can it do to solve problems and help me be better answerable to the population that elected me. So the last chart really is lessons to win based on all of this stuff. A few things to remember, certainly not enough to win in India, but focus on the top 50 to 60 cities. That's where the growth is, and the markets and hinterlands around that. Solve problems relevant for the Indian consumer. If it's astrology and Bollywood, know that and solve for that. Win in Bharat, not just in India. So Bharat is shorthand for rural and semi-urban India. And then finally, more than just a market, really a way to tap into skills and knowledge and know-how and really apply those learnings to your businesses everywhere in the world. Thanks.